Hello, and welcome to the Layer 2 show. Today we're speaking to Piotr, who is a co-founder and researcher of L2BEAT. Hello, Piotr.
Hello, nice to meet you, Agne.
Nice to meet you, Piotr. So I'm very excited to talk to you, as it seems that you're on a very similar mission to Layer 2 show, which is educating people, community about Layer 2. What is a proper Layer 2? What are the opportunities? What are the threats? So I'm very curious to talk to you as a researcher. You have probably found out some interesting things. So let me start with the first question. What is the mission of L2BEAT?
So once again, thank you for inviting me here to speak here. It's a pleasure. And answering your question, we started L2BEAT because we found that there are no great tools that show the adoption of layer 2s for Ethereum. We also found that we are aligned philosophically with the layer 2 vision of Ethereum scaling, right? Which is, well, the base layer cannot scale by itself. We need rollups. And basically, we wanted to show what options are available to users and also what risks there are, because the ecosystem is not yet mature. So we wanted to also highlight that. So basically, the mission is to educate and to promote the scaling with rollups, but also to show what are the current problems of the systems.
Right, understood. On your website, you say that you only include the projects that meet the criteria of yours of what is layer 2. So I know that in the industry, there has been quite a lot of discussions. What are the scaling solutions? What helps Ethereum? What helps other chains? Because we're living in a multi-chain ecosystem right now. So please tell me your definition of what is a proper layer 2 and why others are not a proper layer 2.
So this all started basically this, proper layer 2 definitions where we decided whether or not we actually wanted to include Polygon. This was the main thing in question, right? Because there was this thing, and there is this thing called Binance Smart Chain, right? And I think everybody agrees that Binance Smart Chain is its own thing, and it shouldn't be categorized as layer 2. It's run by Binance. It's it doesn't have security derived from Ethereum, stuff like that. But then comes Polygon, right? With the claims that, they are like hybrid plasma, commit chain, whatever. And they adopt the badge of being a layer 2 scaling solution for Ethereum. And we found that some of the claims that were made about Polygon were not accurate, because Polygon is not a plasma. And I mean the Polygon chain that exists right now is not a plasma. You might call it a commit chain, but it doesn't really matter because it's just a side chain with some validators. The validators are selected by an Ethereum smart contract on layer 1. And there are some, but they're not commitments. Basically, the state roots of Polygon are submitted to the Ethereum chain, but it doesn't do anything outside of the actual commitments. So why we don't think this is a layer 2, and we'll get to a proper definition. If something goes wrong with the Polygon chain, right? There is no way for the Ethereum chain to decide whether or not the state that was published to the Ethereum chain is correct or not. And then because of that, there is no way to trustlessly act on that state, which is to say, if there was a method, for example, to withdraw funds from Polygon that relied on that state being correct, there is no way to check for Ethereum that that state is correct. And so proper layer 2 solutions actually include some mechanisms for validating the state, right? And this is why the definition on L2BEAT states that proper L2 solutions, or at least the L2 solutions that we ourselves consider to be layer 2s, actually rely on Ethereum for their security, because when they publish the state on Ethereum, there is a method either by using validity or like ZK proofs, or by using fraud proofs to determine whether or not the published state actually is correct. This might sound technical in like very simple terms. This means that Ethereum is able to determine if there were no problems with the other chain, right? And for example, Bitcoin is not an L2 to Ethereum because Ethereum is not able to determine if something that happens on Bitcoin is correct or not, right? This doesn't mean that inherently Polygon or Bitcoin, right, are insecure or whatever happens there is incorrect. It just means it's not a layer 2 for Ethereum because Ethereum cannot decide whether or not the stuff that happens there is correct or not.
Right. So here we're talking about the roll-up centric Ethereum scaling roadmap, and we are assessing whether these projects and scalability solutions match that roadmap. Yeah. So I know
Exactly.
that in L2BEAT you track some interesting metrics more than TVL. We can see that Arbitrum has taken 60%, more than that probably. But you also track some other interesting metrics, like let's say how often they submit, the sequence submits the data to the L2 to the layer 1. Can you say something more about why you chose these metrics, and maybe you have some metrics that you're measuring that are not available anywhere else, only on L2BEAT?
So for L2BEAT, we started with just the TVL. Basically, it's just a low-hanging fruit, right? Because the algorithm for calculating TVL is just take all the tokens, multiply by price, and you get the value, right? It is also a quite a good proxy for the actual user activity, right? Because one could argue, and of course, this is not a full picture of what is going on, that the more users there are and the more activity they do, the more liquidity they require. And so the more funds will be actually locked on a particular L2 solution, which does not necessarily is not necessarily the case because, for example, for NFTs, you don't need this, liquidity because you can have activity with NFTs and it wouldn't show up on L2BEAT's TVL. But it's a good enough proxy, at least for now. We also decided to include some other metrics. As you said, we have some very experimental metrics for, and they are experimental because I'm not personally sure they are 100% correct. So this is why we mark them as experimental. And I think the inflows and outflows are present as experimental for metrics for all of the solutions, but also for Arbitrum specifically. I've also added a test metric for the number of transactions. As I said, it's experimental. So, basically, the reason why it's experimental, and I'm not sure if it's correct, is the fact that what we want to do on L2BEAT is not rely, and maybe we'll change that because it might not be feasible for everything that we want to track, but we don't want to rely on people claiming what their volume is or what their transaction throughput is, right? We want to check it ourselves. And because the solutions are rollups, right, we actually are able to at least partially do this because the rollups have to submit the state and the transactions, right? So we can, at least in theory, read them from the on-chain submissions, process them, and then display the stats. So this is what we want to do with gathering the stats, but we also show some other information about the solutions, and this is actually what we call the risk view on our site. So if you go to L2BEAT and you open the site, you'll notice that, of course, we have all of the, the 7-day change of the volume, the TVL, the market share, stuff like this. But also there's the second tab, which shows all the risks associated. And this was a multi-month research project to actually go and find all of the different how all of the different solutions work and what are the edge cases. Some very interesting findings there. Basically, let's do a bit of a controversial take. I don't believe any of the projects are ready for mainstream today, right? If we believe this original vision of cryptocurrency of being open, decentralized, permissionless, censorship resistant, those projects don't fit the criteria, because while they might guarantee in some way that you're not losing your funds, right? And they might be permissionless in the sense that you don't have to apply for anything to enter this project. They're not fully censorship resistant, and they also they are also centralized partially because most of them are upgradable and can change the code under your feet, thus changing the rules, right? So these are the findings that I think are most interesting. The fact that in theory, these systems, these technologies will allow for decentralized scaling, but in practice, at least right now, this is not yet the case.
Very interesting. Can I ask you to expand more on this one word, upgradability? What does it mean for any layer 2 protocol project?
Okay, so basically, let's start with basic layer 1 blockchains like Bitcoin or Ethereum, right? There is this concept of forks. Whenever the blockchain upgrades, there is a fork, which means that there are new rules introduced, and we can get into soft forks, hard forks. It doesn't matter that much. Basically, even the base layer sometimes changes the rules, right? The systems built on those layers, right, which have been previously just dApps, right, but also now include layer 2s, also can have systems that change their code, right? And this might happen because there is governance, and governance decides that actually we should, for example, allow another asset to be transferred to this protocol. But this might be more fundamental, which is that there might be a mechanism in the code of the smart contract itself that allows someone to change the code into a new version. And for example, a protocol like Uniswap, and I'm talking about Uniswap v2 because v3 introduces some more complexity, but Uniswap v2 has this nice system where everything is kind of set in stone. The code of the protocol can never change, and thus you can be sure that in the future you can use the same methods to actually access the system, and the system will work in the same way. In contrast to that, we can have another protocol that introduces some upgradability mechanism, either by swapping some contracts. For example, let's talk Maker. Maker has some governance, and the governance sets some parameters of the systems, right? For example, the collateralization ratio, and also what assets are available. Now with rollups and other solutions, we also can see that some of the parameters can be tweaked, but we can also see some of the more fundamental issues are being allowed to be tweaked. There is this design of smart contracts called proxy. And what proxy is basically a set of two smart contracts. One, which is the smart contract that everybody interacts with, and the other that holds the code. And the proxy has an owner, and the owner can change the contract that has the code. So if I were a malicious owner of such a contract, and users have put money into the contract, and let's say the contract is very simple. The contract just says, if you have put money, right, the contract stores your balance, and then you can withdraw the money. I can change the contract's code to disallow everybody to withdraw the money and only allow myself to withdraw all of the user's funds. Therefore, basically cheating everybody. But also I have set it up right from the start so that I can do this. And this is why with most of the solutions in place right now, you have to put trust in the operators, because the operators hold the keys, the ownership of those proxies. And if they so desire, they are able to steal all of the funds. Some of the solutions, and this is very funny indeed, I think, don't, even though they like don't have this proxy approach, they include stuff in the code that says like, pause the smart contract and withdraw all the funds, like explicitly, not even with this upgrade mechanism. So it's, I think, very important for the users to know that this stuff exists. And it's not to say that you shouldn't use those protocols because of that. I think that you can use whatever you want as long as there is an understanding that, yes, there is some trust that you have to put into this.
Okay, so we have to trust a little bit centralized system in order to achieve our mission and goal and vision to be in a decentralized economy.
Well, at least for now.
At least for now, yes. Is there anything specific that you think that users, let's say not retail users, we're talking about, advanced DeFi users, anything that they should pay attention when using these layer twos from your research?
I think that there is some nuance concerning NFTs. So, for example, if you mint some NFTs on a layer 2, it might be non-obvious what happens when you are to withdraw those NFTs, right? And so normally when you have an NFT on Ethereum, right, you mint it on Ethereum and then just transfer it on Ethereum. What if you mint an NFT on layer 2 and you want to withdraw it back on Ethereum? It doesn't exist on Ethereum. So what actually happens is some of the solutions include a function called withdraw and mint. So in a sense, what happens, the NFT is created on Ethereum when it's withdrawn. So that's one of the nuance for I guess, advanced app users. The other one is for general purpose optimistic rollups. So when you're building a more complicated protocol, right, and you already have code running on the Ethereum layer 1 and it's all good, and you might think, okay, this optimistic rollup allows me to just copy and paste my code basically because it's EVM compliant or EVM equivalent, doesn't really matter. I can just take my existing protocol, right, and put it on there and it will just work. Well, there is this one issue that you might also need to think about, which is what happens if the protocol the layer 2 goes down and you need to exit from it, right? What happens to your protocol? So even though you can just copy and paste code, you also need to be aware of the fact that there needs to be a mechanism to close down and withdraw all the assets that need not be present on Ethereum layer 1, because the assumption is the Ethereum layer 1 will be ever present, right? But the assumption with rollups is that if they fail, the users can trustlessly exit, right? So if you build a protocol on a layer 2, then you need to also account for this edge case where the layer 2 fails and users need to exit. What happens to your protocol then? Stuff like this.
Very interesting. I think we have already actually embarked on this very exciting new phase of Ethereum, of the blockchain world, layer 2. So I really wish L2BEAT all the best of success in your hard work. We'll keep following you and keep tracking all the metrics. And yes, thank you very much once again for coming to the layer 2 show. Is there anything else that you would like to add before we go?
I don't know. I just want to say that I'm really looking forward to where this entire space will go in the future.
Yes. Thank you very much, Piotr.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care.